Welcome to Playback, TRT World's weekly showcase of our best stories from around the globe. Coming up. Missing and presumed dead. We'll talk to our reporter Amit Aliolu about how he's been covering the disappearance of Saudi Arabian journalist Jamal Khashoggi as this shocking story takes strange twists and turns. Businesses in the UK and Europe are waiting to see if diplomats and politicians can put together a Brexit deal. If they can't, it'll take more than a cobbler to repair profits for companies like the historic shoe factory we visited in Dasborough. Adeshwa Josh has been to Cameroon to meet people struggling after being forced out of their homes by a government crackdown. And the world lost an artistic legend this week. We'll have reaction to the death of photojournalist Ara Güler and look back at some of his greatest work. Many around the world have spent the last 2 weeks gripped by the disappearance of Saudi Arabian journalist Jamal Khashoggi. He went missing here in Istanbul on the 2nd of October after entering the Saudi consulate to finalize paperwork for his marriage. While his fiancée waited outside, hours went by, but Khashoggi did not return. It's suspected he was tortured, killed, and dismembered inside the building. Some reports have blamed it on what they've described as a hit squad of Saudis who had flown in and out of Turkey on the very day Khashoggi went missing. Well, as journalists, we've struggled to get many details confirmed as investigations expand. Let's speak now to Amit Aliolu, who's been following this story. Amit, the story is moving all the time, and so much still remains a mystery. What's it been like to cover the story with so much information being leaked rather than announced?
Well, a Khashoggi story is one of the unique stories any journalist would be facing. First, he is a Saudi citizen, he is an American resident, and he entered his own consulate on Turkish soil. So all these elements completely disappeared after he entered the consulate, so everybody would be interested to cover the story. And in order to deal with leaks, as a journalist, regularly we're dealing with these stuff. So it's first, we need to question the credibility of the source. Then, do we know this person or this source before? And after that, if we can confirm this from another reputable news agency or media outlet, and if we get these together, then it is good sign that we can proceed with this, but we need to attribute this to the source we have in hand. This one is so complicated. We've been dealing with lots of examples. One of them, for example, we were about to go live with a line that we have from a reputable agency, and later on, before we go live, a minute before we go live, we were told that it was deleted and the agency apologized. So mistakes can happen, but as a journalist, you have to be very careful whenever you deal with any source you have.
And it seems like the whole world is watching this story for updates. Has there been a big international media scrum outside the consulate there?
Well, we've been covering this story of Mr. Jamal Khashoggi since the 2nd of October when he entered the building behind me, the consulate of Saudi Arabia in Istanbul, and never re-emerged. Lots of international media outlets are covering this. Now it's a little bit quiet. You have Al Jazeera, you have CNN. Lots of our colleagues here are covering it because the story dictates that every media outlet should be interested in the thing. Now, what's happening? Sometimes you have breaking news. Recently, we've had a breaking news, and we have immediately to pack all our things and move, run on our feet to the new location. Fortunately and thankfully that the new location was 10 minutes walk from the place where we were. So we moved there immediately. We started to set up, but we had problems with the police who were trying to control the scene over there. This is a very tiny example that you could face while you're doing this job. But we all should remember that what we are doing, we're covering a story of a man who entered the consulate of his own country and never emerged. Those who care for him never heard or seen him since.
Thanks so much, Ahmed. Well, companies across Europe have a burning question. Will the UK and EU reach a Brexit deal? Our Europe correspondent Simon McGregor-Wood visited one famous shoe factory in England. They're reliant on trade with the EU, and they're worried.
Joseph Cheney and Sons has been making shoes in Desborough since 1896. They do things the old-fashioned way. The leather is still hand-cut, although some modern help is now allowed. The pieces are stitched together to make the upper. And they end up here, where they're attached to a welt. This is soft cork material, which makes the shoe so comfortable. And now it's time for a sole. 300 pairs made this way every day before some extra buff and polishing, and then boxing and shipping out. Handmade in England still means a lot, enough to justify the $450 price tag for a pair.
This is where the process still starts. This is what we call the skin room.
But the raw material is almost all from Europe. Fine calf's leather that arrives daily across the EU's open borders. But for how much longer?
Our business is actually hugely transactional within the European Union. We've got raw material coming in here virtually every day, and we convert that raw material here with the skilled labour that we've got into great shoes, and then a proportion of those shoes we export back to those same countries.
A hard Brexit, or the dreaded no-deal scenario, would almost certainly mean tariffs being placed on all the leather that goes to make these shoes, and those extra costs would have to be passed on to the consumer, making an already expensive pair of English handmade shoes even more expensive. The British fashion industry is worth $36 billion a year, and like any other sector, it's the uncertainty over Brexit which is making people so nervous.
Business deals with change pretty well, and good businesses deal with change very well. What they don't deal with is uncertainty, and the uncertainty is the bad thing at the moment. That's the potential killer at the moment, is not knowing, because you can't plan, you can't invest on something you don't know.
At Cheney & Sons, they accept Brexit is coming and they're ready to adapt. There's confidence in the product. But as the politicians enter the final stages of negotiations, they're hoping their voice will be heard and not drowned out by the political squabbling. They're hoping for a deal that preserves their skills and jobs and the communities that depend on them. Simon McGregor-Wood, TRT World in Desborough, Northamptonshire.
Midterm elections in the United States rarely grab global news headlines, but this year is different. They're regarded as the most important and divisive in years. With Donald Trump in power, the Democrats see a chance to regain control of Congress. For the Republican Party, it'll be a test of loyalty to President Donald Trump. Interestingly, one group whose support for him and for the party is under question is the 52% of white women who voted for Trump. Polls show many of them regret that choice. Some analysts say it could be down to a global outcry over sexual misconduct by powerful men and the recent controversy over the Trump-appointed Supreme Court Judge Brett Kavanaugh. So how will things turn out? Harry Horton found out that Trump has more support than you might think. Here's his report from Pennsylvania.
He's not on the ballot this November, but Donald Trump's shadow looms over the midterm elections.
You know, there's an expression, but under the rules of Me Too, I'm not allowed to use that expression anymore. I can't do it.
Whilst the Me Too movement has emboldened his critics, President Trump has used it to fire up his supporters.
What happened to the Me Too movement in Hollywood? Why aren't they going after the Hollywood stars that did this to them? No, it has turned into nothing feminist anymore. It's all anti-political against the Republicans. What they have done with the whole Kavanaugh campaign and the confirmations is despicable. Despicable.
I am innocent of this charge.
During a contentious struggle for nominating Judge Kavanaugh, President Trump mocked Christine Blasey Ford, one of the women who accused Mr. Kavanaugh of sexual assault.
Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know.
It was a joke that 20-year-olds Lexus and Maggie thought went too far.
I don't think that you should mock someone who says that they've been sexually assaulted.
What do you make of President Trump as a role model for young women like yourselves?
I would say just that since he's not been a politician before, you don't have to be necessarily politician to make a difference for this country.
It feels a bit like the 2016 presidential election all over again. Donald Trump on stage, a packed-out arena. That's exactly what the president wants, to try and energise his supporters and get them out to vote in the midterm elections. But Donald Trump's downplay of the Me Too movement has further energised millions of his opponents across America who hope to send a powerful message in November's elections. Harry Horton, TRT World, in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Venezuela's economic crisis has spiraled to incomprehensible levels. The International Monetary Fund warns that inflation will hit an extraordinary 10 million% next year. To put it all into perspective, Juan Carlos Lamas went to rural Cojedes state to find out how people managed to survive.
It used to be a thriving community of ranchers and farmers where they raised cattle and grew the corn Venezuelans count on as a staple. Not anymore. Hyperinflation has made it hard to count on anything now.
The problems really kicked in a year ago when the prices I paid to purchase the products I sold in my store started tripling from one day to the next.
After 16 years in business, selling fruit and vegetables from her small farm, Lisette Mendoza had to close down her shop. Now the shelves are filled with spider webs.
This store was our everything. It helped us to pay for my children's private school, our food and medicine as well. It also allowed us to pay for our vacations. Everything came out of the store, but now that's over.
San Carlos is a commercial hub serving ranchers and farmers in this rural valley. Dozens of shops and restaurants have closed in the last year. Mendoza and her family say they spent more than $10,000 fixing up the store. The building itself needed work, and they bought scales, refrigerators, freezers, and shelves. They are determined not to lose the investment and hope to reopen someday. In the meantime, Mendoza has let her farm workers go, and she's working the land by herself as a subsistence farmer, taking what she harvests home to feed her family of 4. But that's not easy either. Many farmers and ranchers have packed up and moved away. Seed and supplies are expensive. Salesman Luis Carlos Otaiza says fertilizer is out of reach for most of the farmers in the area.
The few pesticides that I can find, I cannot sell because they're too expensive. What I have left in stock is for my own use.
For Mendoza, her husband, and their 2 daughters, food from their farm means food on the table, which they hope will continue to provide the nourishment they need as they try to ride out Venezuela's economic crisis. Juan Carlos Lamas, TRT World, San Carlos, Venezuela.
Here's a story we ran this week about one brave woman in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Fata Orlovic returned to her former home after the conflict in the 1990s and found a Serbian Orthodox church had been built on her land. Since then, she's been fighting a legal battle to have it moved, and her case is about to be heard at the European Court of Justice. Our correspondent, Yolo Abdavid, has been to meet her.
Fata Orlovic has endured much in her 76 years. Her husband was murdered in the 1990s, and 6 of her children have emigrated. She returned home despite the horror of ethnic cleansing undertaken by Serbs and several massacres in the region. Konjevic Polje is less than 20 kilometers from Srebrenica, where thousands of people were killed.
I want it removed as soon as possible, and for them to clean up my garden and pay compensation for trauma and suffering.
While Fata Orlovic was away, local municipal officers gave a hectare of her land to the Serbian Orthodox Church. When she returned, she was outraged to find it built directly in front of her house.
The church was built based on a decision taken by the municipality of Bratunac on September 11, 1997. Following that solution, the location and ownership is granted to the Serbian Orthodox Church in Drinjača parish. Having said that, it was the local authorities' responsibility to solve all legal ownership matters with the Orlovic family.
By October 2007, it seemed Fatah had won her battle. After a series of meetings between Serb politicians in the Republika Srpska region of Bosnia and the Orthodox Church, it was decided that the building would be removed.
We've agreed to figure out a way to remove the church and have started to plan on how to do that in the shortest time possible.
11 years ago, the now president of Bosnia and Herzegovina was the prime minister of the Serbian mini-state. After an 18-year legal battle, Fatah Orlovic's case is about to be heard in the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Now that follows Bosnia and Herzegovina's constitutional court deciding in 2017, after several cases before then, that her rights had not been violated because she had refused a financial settlement. So far, she's turned down $1.5 million. Ironically, the church is only used once a year.
I don't care about judges or prosecutor. I don't want anybody on land that belongs to me and my 7 children. This is my last call for them to move it.
Nearby are signs of the conflict that drove so many away. Fatah insists her land must be returned to her as it was before the war. Yolo David, TRT World, Konjevic Polje.
There's not a great deal of television coverage out of Cameroon, but what's happening there is astonishing. There's been a crackdown on secessionists in English-speaking regions, and it's driven thousands of people from their homes. Many have crossed into Nigeria, where the United Nations is providing food and shelter. But not everyone is getting the help they need. Adeshwa Josh traveled to Yaoundé and sent us this report.
Gladys Taba is struggling to settle into a new home in Yaoundé. Her 3 children and 12 relatives sleep in this room. On the day Gladys fled her village in southwestern Cameroon, she says the army had come searching for separatists and was shooting at anyone in sight.
I've decided to send the last born of mine to go and stay somewhere because she cannot cope here.
Gladys's brother says he won't be able to support his sister for much longer. Ndukum Lawrence doesn't have a decent job, and now he can barely provide enough food for his enlarged family.
I was even planning to go to the Ministry of Territorial Administration to see if there is any means that they are doing to help those who are here, because there is a lot of suffering, especially feeding.
They eat once a day on a good day, and the children aren't spared from the rationing.
More than 200,000 people have fled the Anglophone crisis since it began in 2016 to places like Douala and Yaoundé and others to neighboring Nigeria. But there isn't a single internally displaced camp in Cameroon.
For the Cameroon government, setting up camps would mean accepting it has failed to control the Anglophone crisis. The government blames the English-speaking secessionists for preventing the disbursement of more than $20 million allocated to support the internally displaced.
We wish to settle this issue without needing to erect or to build camps.
UNHCR says they are trying to help victims fleeing the Anglophone crisis. And although it is difficult to have a good overview of the situation due to the difficulties of access to the field, UNHCR and various UN agencies in Cameroon are conducting missions to Buea in order to monitor the situation. That means Lawrence's situation won't change anytime soon. So now he has to figure out how to keep his family alive. Adeshewa Josh, TRT World, Yaoundé, Cameroon.
I've always asked myself, what happens to all the unsold clothing in shops around the world? Well, this week I found out that manufacturers and designers actually destroy hundreds of tons of unsold textiles every year. They say it stops counterfeiting and keeps the value of their brands high. But one South African organization has persuaded retailers around the world to hand over their unsold merchandise. Here's a really interesting report from Crystal Orderson in Cape Town.
A year ago, Vuhelwa Moikwa was unemployed and struggling to survive. But today, she's selling clothes in one of Cape Town's biggest townships and earning $150 per week. Things changed after she joined the clothing bank. It helps unemployed mothers start small retail businesses.
My dignity is back, and now I'm able to put something on the table for my children. Being a single mom, I'm supportive now to my family as well.
Tracy Chambers started the clothing bank 8 years ago. She managed to persuade top retailers to donate their unsold clothing. The clothing bank's budding entrepreneurs then buy it and sell it.
Last year we got 1.8 million items worth over 110 million rand, and then we use that product to change lives. We recruit unemployed mothers into a very deep 2-year program, starting with business skills as our core foundation, and women start running a business so that they can earn while they learn.
More than 3,000 women have benefited from the clothing bank, and it's here in this warehouse that the former unemployed women come to buy their clothing stock. Last year, it made them more than $2.5 million in profit. Africa's largest retailer says it hopes its participation helps bring down South Africa's 27% unemployment rate.
The clothing bank has really been, for us, a way of realizing our role as a corporate citizen. And it is because it's quite integrated. It touches a whole lot of things. Whilst we're making a difference in lives of destitute women, we also are addressing environmental issues. We're also creating jobs. We know the impact it has had in the families of these women.
1 global and 7 local retailers have signed up, and the clothing bank is also negotiating with a global company so more women like Vuhelwa Moikwa can get to work. She's hoping to open her own shop soon so she can hire women just like her. Crystal Orderson, TRT World, Cape Town.
This week, the world lost legendary Turkish photojournalist Ara Güler, who died here in Istanbul at the age of 90. He was admitted to hospital after having a heart attack. Here's Jemima Walker on his remarkable life.
They called him the Eye of Istanbul. Ara Güler recently had his 90th birthday. The event was marked with the opening of a new museum dedicated to the legendary photographer.
Now the matter is how to put the archive collected in a space and present in a way that it can communicate with the visitors.
Born in 1928 to Armenian parents, Ara Güler first studied cinema. But the sights and textures of Istanbul drew him to still photography. And the work brought him worldwide fame as the chronicler of his native city. In the 1950s, he became the Near East correspondent for Time Life magazine. His career took him across Central and Southern Asia and Africa. On his travels, he worked alongside renowned photojournalists Henri Cartier-Bresson and Marc Ribot, who recruited him to join the elite Magnum Photos agency. He never considered himself a photographer. Instead, Ara Güler considered himself a historian and a photojournalist.
He's been capturing Istanbul and Anatolia, and later on the world in general, for many years, starting from 1950s onwards. He's been documenting Istanbul, which no longer exists as it was then. He's been capturing people, and his portraits are also extremely important. And he's been photographing, of course, the artists all around the world. So he's very important in many ways.
Asked if there'd ever been a picture he'd failed to capture, the photojournalist confidently said no.
No, I not think so. I catch the good subject. For instance, photography is something new.
Now, in the digital age of smartphones, with cameras always on hand, Ara Güler says people are missing out on life and on the true meaning of photography.
You see, if it's 20 people sitting, 15 people is just doing this. Life is not less. Life is living, and photography is a part of the living.
Well, that rounds up your week of news here on Playback. Stay tuned to TRT World for all the latest stories. We'll leave you with a few of our favorite irregular photographs.